Well, my first thought this morning uh, was what secret beauty regime has Donald Trump been using for that mugshot, linking up with your previous item. My second thought was, as journalists and as analysts, it's going to be really important to keep our eyes on the facts, on the legal process, on the American system, and to be able to cut through the political spin and, frankly, the disinformation. So let me take up your 2 points, Ian. The first one on the legal side is that the indictments, both at the federal level and at the Georgia state level, have said that Donald Trump, like anybody, has the right to comment on an election. Trump has the right to say he thinks the election was rigged. The question is not that. The question is whether Donald Trump and his 18 co-defendants in Georgia took action knowing that they were issuing false statements. In other words, fraudulent statements, and then took action not just to complain about the election, but to overturn it. In other words, a plan carried out over 3 months to remove the legally selected, the legally elected representatives of Joe Biden and to parachute in Trump's fake electors to try to overturn the result in Georgia and other states. In other words, trying to cling on to the White House not by being elected, but through deception, or as Trump would put it, through interference. Your second question, and I think is even more important for us in the media and as analysts, and that is to stop going on about the polls. Because what happens here is that Trump sets off a self-reinforcing cycle. A lot of people know who he is. He does have a base who support him, but then he keeps saying, look at the polls and the legal process will only make me stronger. And by focusing only on him, we don't talk about the other candidates in the race. Only a day after the first Republican debate, we don't talk about the important issues facing America. We only talk about Trump. And if we only talk about Trump, he turns out the sun, and he's the only one that the media can find in the darkness.
Does any of this matter, Scott? In the sense, I mean, I know we've talked many times, and you say, you know, in terms of the legal side of it, you've got to look at the facts and not be put off by the spin and all the rest of it, which is absolutely valid. I totally agree with you. However, does any of it matter in the sense that even if he is convicted, this does seem to be playing in his favour, and actually it doesn't seem like it would in any way stop his ability to become the nominee or indeed to win the presidency?
Well, and, you know, again, a quick fact check to cut through the spin, and that is after the federal indictments early this month, and after the Georgia indictments, Donald Trump has slipped in the polls in the first Republican contest that take place next January and next February. But the more important point here is that the political process is separate from the legal system. Once you keep talking about the polls and once you basically follow Trump's line, which is, if you prosecute me, it'll just make me stronger, you put your thumbs on the scales of justice. In other words, let the political process unfold as it may, but that does not give Donald Trump immunity from prosecution. In other words, even if he's elected president, he has to be held accountable before the law.
But look at what happened, what was it, yesterday or last night or the night before, when the Republican hopefuls all joined in the debate. It was on Fox News, I think, wasn't it? And Trump wasn't there. So you can argue there that the political process was happening without him. And yet he still managed to grab all the headlines. And he was watched on X, as it is now, Twitter. He was watched by some 200 million people. He still, even if the political process insists on going ahead without him, he still manages to be bigger than that.
Well, that 200 million figure is a bit suspect for reasons I can explain later. But you just reinforced my point, Ann. Turn off the lights, and there's only Trump to be followed in the darkness. So what happens? We've got 8 candidates trying to make their names, some of them with extensive political experience, like the former Vice President Mike Pence or the former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. They're trying to discuss important issues like abortion, like immigration, like the economy. So what does Donald Trump do? He sets himself up with his friend, Tucker Carlson, a man who was considered so extreme that he was let go by Fox TV. And then Trump says, it's me and Tucker. And what does Trump say? Trump says that the events of the Capitol attack on January 6, 2021, and these are his exact words, were a beautiful day which involved people who loved America. So rather than us talking about the serious challenge to the American system and democracy, people ignore what's happening in Milwaukee and go to X or Twitter or whatever Elon Musk calls it these days and just simply have this diet of misinformation, of insult, and indeed of threat. And the question at the end of the day is, look, at the end of the day, people are going to have to make their choices politically. But in terms of the legitimacy of the legal and political system, to always remember that Donald Trump is trying to set a narrative that is not exactly the day-to-day reality that we face in America or indeed in the UK.
Why do people believe him? And I'm not making myself popular with a lot of our viewers now, and I know it. But as someone who has spent his entire career, I mean, as Anne has as well, talking to politicians, understanding how politics works, you can see through what Donald Trump is doing politically a lot of the time. You can't always take him seriously. I'd argue you can't take him seriously most of the time, really. And yet people absolutely swallow what he has to say. It's almost like a cult.
Well, I wouldn't go that way, because I think you have to respect the fact that if you go back to 2015, 2016, even though Donald Trump was pretty much a reality TV star, even though he wasn't actually that successful as a businessman, what he did is he was tapping into an America where many people did not like Hillary Clinton, did not think that she should hold the office. Many people were still suffering from the effects of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, and America had become polarized. It had become an us versus them society. And Trump steps in as the showman, or shall we say it's the snake oil salesman who says, I can make it all better. And by dealing with illusion, by dealing with spectacle, by dealing with his own ego and making it larger than life, he does draw people in, and he raises the stakes. Because what he says is if you ever don't believe, if you ever don't buy the show, if you ever don't buy the snake oil, you're choosing dark forces. You're choosing the deep state over me. You're choosing the enemies over me. And people get entrenched in that because it's very hard. And you know this, that when people get entrenched in an opinion, it's hard to pull back from it because you lose all that investment you've made, which now with Trump goes back 8 years.